Bumpy Johnson is, by right, considered the top of Harlem's criminal world, the neighborhood's godfather. But there are those who play by no rules and answer to no mafia bosses. That week, people came into the city who didn't need money. They needed chaos. They threw Bumpy Johnson off a rooftop to prove one thing: the rules don't work anymore. And while the city was burying his name, he was redrawing the map of power until his enemies started disappearing without a trace. Get comfortable. We're starting. Part 1. No Rules. Harlem, New York. Friday, 1812. Harlem always knew the difference between violence and order. Violence is loud. Order is what stays when the loudness leaves. That week, something new crept through the neighborhood. Not hunger, not the police. Something cleaner than desperation, and meaner than money. They didn't announce themselves. They edited the rules. A runner came in, his cheek split, his eyes dry. He didn't complain. He just set a matchbook on the table like evidence. On it, in pencil, 2 words: no rules. Red stood by the window and looked out at the street like the street had learned a new language. They did this for nothing, he said. Stephanie didn't ask who. She already knew what for nothing meant. It meant for a message. Bumpy picked up the matchbook, turned it once, then set it back down carefully, the way you set down a blade. People who do things for nothing, he said, are never broke. 1839. In one day, they hit 3 spots, not the big ones, not the ones that start a war. They hit the soft parts, places that were supposed to be safe, because everyone had agreed they were safe. A backroom dice game, trashed, but nobody robbed. A numbers lady, shaken, but her money left on the floor. A bartender, dragged outside, slapped twice, and told to repeat one sentence: "Tell Johnson, the city changed." No one died. That was the point. Death would have been normal. This was instruction. 1905. Bumpy walked the block himself, not because he had anything to prove, because he needed to hear how Harlem was breathing. People looked away too fast. Doors closed too quietly. Even the kids played closer to the stoops, as if the street had teeth now. A man sweeping in front of a shop leaned in without stopping his broom. "Not Italians," he muttered. Bumpy didn't answer. He didn't need labels. He needed patterns. Across the avenue, a car sat too long at the curb. Not police. Not local. Cars like that didn't belong to anyone you could knock on. It pulled off slow, like it had plenty of time. Bumpy watched it go. Then he went back upstairs and did what he always did when the air changed. He made a list. 1941. On the table, Stephanie spread out names: bars, basements, storefronts, back doors for deliveries, not targets, breathing holes. Red tapped one address with his finger. "Blue Lantern," he said. "They've been in and out all week." Bumpy looked at the name without blinking. The lantern wasn't special. That was the danger. You don't ambush a man where he's armored. You catch him where he's routine. Stephanie's voice stayed level. You go there, they get what they want. Bumpy's mouth tightened into something that wasn't a smile. "If I don't go," he said, "they get it anyway." 2018. Night came down like a coat. The lantern smelled like whiskey trying to pass for perfume. A piano in the corner worked itself raw. Men laughed too high. Women watched too carefully. Bumpy didn't walk in like a king. He walked in like a fact. Heads turned, then turned away. Red stayed near the door, close enough to move, far enough to see. Bumpy took a seat with his back to the wall, an old habit, older than money. and he let the room keep breathing. A waiter brought a glass he didn't order, set it down, didn't meet his eyes. Bumpy didn't drink. He watched condensation crawl down the glass, slow and quiet. Time in Harlem always tells you the truth if you let it speak. At 2023, the piano missed a note. At 2024, the laughter thinned. At 2025, the door closed a little too softly. And Bumpy understood the main thing. They weren't coming for his money. They were coming for his timing. 2027. Two men moved in from the left. Not drunk, not nervous. The way men move when they've rehearsed being inevitable. A third appeared behind Red, so close Red felt him before he saw him. A hand touched Red's elbow, polite as a dance. "Don't," a quiet voice said. "Not tonight." Red's jaw tightened. His eyes flashed toward Bumpy. Bumpy didn't look back. Looking back is permission. He set his palm flat on the table, steady, calm. Then he stood. Not fast, not slow. Exactly on time. 2031. They didn't hit him in front of the room. They didn't need a crowd. They guided him down a hallway behind the bar, narrow, sticky, smelling of citrus and old smoke. A door, then another, stairs, up. The building creaked like it didn't want to be involved. On the second floor, someone's radio played a love song too loud. On the third, someone laughed behind a locked door. On the fourth, the air got colder, like the city was holding its breath. On the fifth floor, they stopped. One of them spoke for the first time. "You ever notice," he said, "how easy it is to make a man go missing in a city full of people?" Bumpy answered without turning his head. "You ever notice," he said, "how hard it is to live after you do?" 2034. The roof door opened. Wind. Tar. Rain that had dried and left the sky's dirt behind. And something else. Fresh-cut wood. Construction. A narrow strip of scaffolding ran along the parapet. Planks stacked neat. Below, a tarp was stretched over the inner yard like a dark sheet. This wasn't a murder plan. It was a proof plan. One of them stepped closer, smiling like he'd found a shortcut. "Nothing personal, Johnson," he said. "Just an update." Bumpy's eyes slid to the parapet, to the drop, to the quiet way they were placed around him. He didn't plead. He didn't bargain. He just catalogued. How many? How close? Which one liked talking? Which one didn't? Then a hand struck his shoulder. Not a shove like anger. A push like a stamp on paper. 2035. The world tilted. For a second, the city was all sky. Then it was all falling. He saw the tarp below, black, stretched, waiting. He saw the scaffolding edge flash past like a ruler. Impact came in two parts. First, the heavy give, then the violent tear, and then the hard truth underneath. Pain lit up his chest like a match. He didn't scream. Screams waste air. He rolled, tasted blood, and forced his lungs to remember their job. Above, a shape leaned over the parapet. A voice dropped down, casual. "Harlem won't miss you." Bumpy stared up into the rectangle of night and answered in his head because his mouth was busy staying alive. Harlem misses order. Not men. 2041. Footsteps echoed somewhere close, inside, not above. A service door. A lock that knew a hand. A figure slipped into the inner yard, moving like his whole life was backdoors. No panic, no questions. He knelt beside Bumpy, checked the pulse at his throat, then said one sentence like a commandment. "Stay dead." Bumpy's eyes shifted. Just once. A nod so small it was almost a blink. The man dragged him into shadow, under the stink of wet wood and old trash, toward a narrow passage the street never noticed. Above them, the roof door shut, and Harlem, out on the avenues, kept breathing, somewhere between rumor and mourning. Because by midnight, everyone would hear the same thing. Bumpy Johnson fell. And in Harlem, fell sounds a lot like ended. Unless you didn't. Part 2. Stay Dead. Harlem, New York. Saturday, 2318. Pain doesn't ask who you are. It just counts you in pieces. Bumpy lay on a narrow cot in a room with no sign and no clocks. It smelled of alcohol, old wood, and soap. The kind of place where people get put back together without questions. An old man in a white shirt rolled up his sleeves and worked in silence. Not a doctor. More like a craftsman who knew how to set breathing back where it belonged. "Ribs," he said at last. "One for sure. Maybe 2. Shoulder?" "Shoulder 2. A pause. "You're not going to the hospital." Bumpy stared at the ceiling. "I'm not," he said. The old man nodded like it wasn't a decision, but a rule. "Then you live here, and you die where they're looking for you." 2344. Red came in through the back door. No knock, because knocking is a sound for strangers. He wore the same suit, but it sat differently now, like it did on a man who'd seen too many stairwells tonight. He set a newspaper on the table, still warm, like a fresh lie. The headline was bold, honest in its filth. "Johnson plunges from roof. Harlem in shock." The small print read, "Police investigating." In Harlem, everyone knew what that meant. The police were waiting to see who shot first. Red swallowed. "They think you're dead." "They have to," Bumpy said. Red looked down at the bandages. "They stood up there and watched, smiling." "Then they believe it," Bumpy said. "Let them keep believing." Sunday, 2:06. Stephanie arrived quietly, like a document. Hat, gloves, coat, clean, like dirt couldn't touch her. Really, she just knew where to put it. She didn't rush to Bumpy, didn't gasp. She only looked at him the way you look at numbers you have to keep inside the lines. "They cut the breathing," she said. "They tried," Bumpy corrected. Stephanie set a small notebook on the table. 2 calls overnight. One club owner said, "Times have changed." One landlord suddenly remembered, "You're not welcome here." And one more thing. She raised her eyes. "They're visiting the places they usually see you. They want your people to flinch." Bumpy drew a slow breath, through pain, but steady. "Then they need my answer." "Yes," Stephanie said. "A shot." "They won't get it," Bumpy said. Red snapped his head up. "But if we stay quiet, they'll push further." Bumpy turned his eyes to him. Silence can be movement too. 2:31. There was a map in the room. Not a pretty one. A sheet of paper on the wall, pencil lines, pins for marks. Harlem like a nervous system. Stephanie spoke in short strokes. "These people don't bargain." "Then we won't bargain with them," Bumpy said. He lifted a hand to his ribs, waited out the flare of pain, then went on, "Power isn't fear. Power is when you've got a route, money, a spot, and a man who opens the door. They've got all that." So, he stopped for a second, like he was granting himself permission. "So we make sure none of it works." Stephanie nodded. "Disappearances?" "Not bodies," Bumpy said. "Functions." Red didn't get it right away. Then his face shifted, when fear turns into a task. "Couriers, cars, deliveries, meeting places." "And air," Bumpy said. "Most of all, the air." Sunday, 10:14. While the city woke up, Harlem learned to pretend. On the sidewalks, people said what they were supposed to say. Shame about Bumpy. It's over. Now there'll be blood. But none of his people fired a shot, and that confused them more than bullets. The first hits were almost funny. That's why they were frightening. One messenger from the new crew came to a door, and a different woman opened it and said, "You've got the wrong floor," even though he never got floors wrong. One driver pulled up to a warehouse, and the guard calmly held up a paper. "No unloading today. Inspection." Stamped. Real. One man tried to buy his from his, and his suddenly looked at him like he was an outsider. No blood, just the feeling that the air had gotten tighter. Sunday, 1722. By evening they were furious, not from losses, from not understanding. Because with a street enemy it's simple. You see a face, you hear a sound, you answer louder. Here the face was gone, the sound was gone. The only answer was that doors stopped recognizing them. One of the new men hit a shop owner right in front of everyone just to take his power back. And for the first time in 2 days, Harlem didn't look away. People didn't rush him. They just watched. Long, heavy. And the man understood. He was Chujoy here, an outsider, even with a gun. That same evening, someone came to the phone in the room with no sign and told Bumpy, "There's a rumor in the city." "What kind?" Bumpy asked. The man lowered his voice. "That you didn't die. That you just disappeared." Bumpy closed his eyes for a second. "Let them think that," he said. "If I disappeared, I can show up anywhere." Sunday, 2311. That night, Stephanie brought a thin folder. Clean. Too neat for Harlem. She set it on the table and didn't smile. "These are their hands," she said. "Not faces. Hands." Red frowned. "What is this?" Stephanie opened the folder. Inside were names, warehouse firms, dispatchers, suppliers, drivers, property owners. Too respectable to be street. Too convenient to be random. Bumpy studied the list and said quietly, "That's why they don't mind getting their hands dirty. They've got clean gloves." Stephanie closed the folder. "And now the question," she said. "When do we hit?" Bumpy took a pencil. Thought. Not about revenge. About time. "Not now," he said. "They're waiting for hysteria. We'll give them procedure." He wrote 2 words on a sheet, big as an order. "Don't touch." A pause. Then, beneath it, smaller, but just as firm, he added, "Yet." Red let out a breath, and his shoulders dropped a little, like Harlem remembered how to breathe for a second. Stephanie looked at the words and nodded. "Then let them come for what they're not allowed to touch." And somewhere far off, on the other side of the city, the people with no rules started building their next strike. Because they thought time was working for them. They didn't know time is somebody's territory too. Part 3. The Funerals. Harlem, New York. Monday, 5:58. Mornings in Harlem don't start with the sun. They start with breathing. The ones who already know the news breathe quieter. There was only one piece of news. Bumpy Johnson was dead. And everyone who said it out loud left a pause after it, like they were waiting for someone to correct them. No one did. That's what made the rumor believable. Stephanie sat at the table. The phone was silent, like a witness who'd been paid to keep quiet. Red paced in short steps, back and forth, back and forth. "They're already moving in," he said. "They took 2 spots, just walked right in." "Let them," Stephanie said. "The deeper they go, the easier it is to close them in." Red stopped. And if they start cutting people? Stephanie lifted her eyes. Then the police start asking questions. And that's air, too. 6:41. Bumpy lay in the room with no sign. His shoulder burned. His ribs negotiated with every breath. But his mind was clean, because pain is noise, and he knew how to listen underneath noise. The old man who'd been putting him back together poured water. "You ought to be in a hospital," he said, out of habit. "I need them to think I'm in the ground," Bumpy answered. The old man looked at him for a long time. "Then do what dead men do," he said. "Don't move without a reason." Bumpy closed his eyes. "There'll be a reason," he said. "On schedule." 8:12. By noon, the new crew had its first problems. Not bullets, not knives, not the street, paper. One of their men was walking out of a building when a revolver turned up in his pocket. Clean, oiled, like new, except the number on the barrel already lived in a case file. The police didn't ask, "Where'd you get it?" They asked, "Why are you carrying it?" They took him fast. Too fast for it to be an accident. An hour later, another one of theirs got caught with a shotgun that was logged as evidence in an old Bronx murder. The gun didn't fire that day, but it fired on paper. Down at the precinct, a detective said quietly, almost without anger, "I don't know who you are, but I know that piece, and it knows you better than you know yourself." 10:03. The new crew weren't stupid. They were just the kind of men who believed a city was only the street. When two of theirs got picked up on evidence guns, they understood the main thing. Somebody was playing on a different field. They started looking for Bumpy, not like an enemy, like a ghost. And then they did what people with no rules do when they feel an invisible hand. They decided to hit everyone at once. They gathered men, gathered guns, gathered anger. But anger doesn't replace a map. 12:26. Stephanie picked up the receiver, unhurried, like time belonged to her. On the other end was the captain from the precinct, the one who usually spoke to her like she was a problem. Today, he spoke to her like she was a fact. "Miss St. Clair," he said, "I've got disorder." "Disorder is what you call it, when you don't control it," Stephanie said. "They're not yours," the captain said, "and they're not mine. They belong to nobody." A pause. "I need grounds to take them in. Real grounds." Stephanie looked at Red. "Your grounds are already on the way," she said, "in a box, with seals." The captain exhaled, the way men exhale when, after a long time, they finally see stairs leading down out of a fire. "And what do you want in return?" he asked. Stephanie answered the way you answer when it isn't about money. "Don't interfere." 15:09. They scheduled the funeral for evening, not because that's how it's done, because night holds secrets better. The casket was closed, on the lid, wreaths, heavy as promises. People walked in silence. An old man at the door to the funeral parlor said he was a sinner, but he held the line. And a lot of heads nodded. Because Harlem doesn't demand saints. It demands borders. Red stood beside Stephanie. His face was stone. "He's not in there," Red whispered. "And that's the smartest thing he could have done," Stephanie said. 18:44. The new crew came too. Not out of respect, out of display. 3 walked in first, 2 stayed by the door. One of them smiled, too wide for mourning. "Pretty," he said. "Harlem knows how to cry." Red took a step, but Stephanie stopped him with her eyes, not a hand. Eyes that knew how to command. The new men didn't notice what they should have noticed. The police stood too straight, too calm. too correctly placed in the corners of the room, like rehearsal. The captain came in without taking off his hat. "Gentlemen," he said loud, "I'm asking everyone to remain where they are." One of the new men twitched. "This a joke?" The captain raised the papers. "These are your grounds," he said. "Illegal possession of firearms. Firearms recorded as evidence in open cases. Connection to transport and sale. And one more thing." He glanced at a list. "Resisting." It all sounded so routine it turned frightening, because routine is the most reliable kind of force. 1847. They tried to leave. But leaving is a route too. And the route was already occupied. The two at the door took a step and ran into men in plain clothes. No guns drawn, just badges shown. For the first time in their lives, the new men met a kind of power that doesn't shout. One of them lunged, threw an elbow, and took a baton to the knee. Short, precise, not out of anger, out of procedure. And as they were let out, nobody in the room screamed. Nobody clapped. Harlem just watched, because it understood. That's what order looks like when it comes back. 1931. After the funeral, people scattered fast. Mourning is a luxury when business is moving around you. Stephanie went back upstairs to the same room over the shop, opened the window, inhaled the damp air like a test. Red sat down, and for the first time in 2 days, his fingers stopped shaking. "They got them," he said, "but not all of them." Stephanie nodded. "The rest will run." And when men run, they leave tracks. In the corner of the room, half in shadow, Bumpy stood. No hat, paler than usual, but the eyes were the same, dry, alive. Red jumped up, but Bumpy raised a hand. "Quiet," he said. "Let the city think I'm in the ground one more minute." Stephanie looked at him calmly. "The police did what you wanted." "The police did what they needed," Bumpy said. "That's cleaner." He went to the table, took a sheet of paper and a pencil. His ribs reminded him they existed, but he didn't give them a vote. He wrote 2 words. Big, heavy, like a sentence, order, holds. Then he put a period under it. Red read it and let out a breath. "So what now?" Bumpy lifted his eyes. "Now," he said, "they'll learn that no rules is a rule too. Just not theirs." 20:06. Down on the street, a car rolled by. Slow. Too slow. In the window across the way, someone stirred a curtain. Stephanie shut the window. "The rumor will spread," she said, "that you're alive." Bumpy nodded. "Let it. A rumor is a pretext, and a pretext is a door." He looked at the shadow on the wall, his shadow, still weak but steady. "And when they come for my life again," he paused, "they'll be coming into a city where everything is signed." And Harlem, which had been holding its breath all day, finally exhaled. Not because it had become safe, but because it had become understandable again.